On today's World Insight with Tian Wei, the World Bank, the institution for global development, has to find a new leader. Where will that person come from? The latest gigs and tech in their biggest show. As the Consumer Electronics Show kicks off, what will sweep us off our feet now? And welcome to World Insight with me, Tian Wei. The program is coming to you live on CGTN. We begin with the major developments in the World Bank. Its president, Dr. Jim Yong Kim, said he is resigning at the end of this month without finishing his term. He's reportedly at odds with the Trump administration's policies on climate change. What's the blowback of his resignation? Will this trigger a reform in the World Bank system? Before our discussion, look at this.
An abrupt resignation. Jim Yong Kim's resignation from the World Bank came as a shock to many, as he still had more than 3 years left in his current term. Kim was nominated by former U.S. President Barack Obama for a first and second term. He had pushed financing for green energy projects and largely dropped support for coal power investments, but had avoided public clashes with the Trump administration. Analysts say this is likely to set off a fierce battle between the U.S. and other countries, as it'll give Donald Trump the opportunity to nominate his choice to fill the World Bank post. Since the creation of the World Bank at the end of World War II, its leaders have all been Americans. Other emerging countries, including China and other Asian nations, have criticized the selection process. The next day, the World Bank released a report cutting global growth forecast for 2019 by 1/10 of a percentage point to just below 3%. According to the World Bank, from 2010 to 2016, 7 major emerging markets accounted for almost 1/4 of global economic output. In 2016 alone, these emerging markets contributed 1 percentage point to a total 2.4% global growth rate. After Kim's resignation, CEO Kristalina Georgieva will assume the role of interim president. The 189-nation World Bank is the largest government source for development funding, providing low-cost loans for projects around the world. Amid global economic slowdown, the leadership transition is sure to bring further uncertainties.
For more discussion on the World Bank President Jim Yong Kim's resignation and who's next, we are joined in New York by Max Wolf, managing partner and at Multivariate and also professor at the New School University. In Beijing studio, entertainment, political and economic affairs commentator. Gentlemen, welcome to our program. Well, may I go to you first, Professor Wolf? This is a sudden resignation. Of course, today it is already being known that Mr. Kim will join a private equity firm on infrastructure called the GIP, but that is not the point. The point is, why is he leaving so abruptly? Well, he obviously has been contributing and very enthusiastic of his job as the president of the World Bank.
Yes, so great to be here. Thanks for having me. Dr. Kim is almost universally well-liked, and I think he's sort of famous for being very diplomatic. So to see a sudden departure without much notice is very much not who this individual Dr. Kim is. So clearly there's something going on there or about to happen which has made him upset. And given the relatively abrupt announcement of departure from Nikki Haley, who was the U.S. ambassador to the United Nations, it does appear that there is something being discussed at the highest levels of the U.S. government that is distasteful enough to get very diplomatic career folks disinterested in continuing to be associated with the administration, which is probably another topic for another day, but it is not a comforting thought at all. I think Dr. Kim deserves a lot of credit for having a life in global service. He was a true internationalist on most of American history, and probably the balance of global leadership position. That's a good thing. It's come to be seen as a sort of a negative, almost an insult, to be called a globalist in the Trump administration. Wow. And he had made, as have so many, climate change his sort of feature position, and the Trump administration has departed radically with recent American and global opinion on that subject. So clearly that may be the issue here. But what we're going to have now is a struggle over whether the United States, which, by the way, probably for the first time in the history of the World Bank won't be the biggest economy, can still name a person to lead this institution, especially if the person and the U.S. government doesn't support the institution of the World Bank as much as it has historically over the 70 years.
We'll, of course, discuss that issue a bit later in our discussion. Mr. Tangen, though, we all know Dr. Kim, even though as president of the World Bank, has been a nominee by President Obama. And that was during the earlier administration. Of course, the current administration, compared to the earlier, has been not necessarily seeing eye to eye on many issues, Mr. Tangen.
You're absolutely right. I mean, Donald Trump has not hidden his disdain for the World Bank. He sees it as a bunch of do-gooders who have not done good for the United States. It does not fit with his America First policy and goals. So, yes, he's been very, very dismissive, and it's quite possible, as Max said, that something is in the offing that could radically change. I mean, he has threatened to pull out of institutions before. Basically, every multilateral organization out there has been under attack by him. So it wouldn't be surprising, I think, to many people if he had an idea, especially one that could be very sensational.
Last year, I did have the opportunity to interview Dr. Jim Yong Kim. In fact, in the latter half of the year, and asked him his opinion on leadership. Here's what he said when he was still the president of the World Bank. He emphasized, in fact, on hope. Listen.
For me, hope is not what you come to on the basis of analysis. Hope is a moral choice. And in a position like mine, if I ever tell you that a country or a group of people is hopeless, you should make sure that I get fired. Because there's no such thing as a country without hope. There's no such thing as a group of people without hope, if people like you and me will do the right thing. The one thing I'd say about leadership is that right now, what I see is a narrowing of the scope of concern for leaders. In other words, leaders are much more now turning to saying, well, I'm going to think about my problem. I'm not going to think about the problem. Right? The problem is climate change in the world. The problem is 8 billion people who by 2025 we're going to have access to broadband, have access to smartphones, but if you then turn around and instead say, well, I'm going to only think about the people who vote for me, or I'm only going to think about my country, or even my region, my state, if you think about that, if you think about my problem, then we're going to be in trouble.
Dr. Jim Yong Kim, the president of the World Bank until the 1st of February, earlier talking to me. Obviously, he's been talking about the difference, Professor Wolf, between the problem and my problem. The problem is the bigger issue, while my problem is a very limited issue with a limited vision. But the question is, what will be the role of the World Bank for the future, given the fact there is already huge debate about what should be the global development like and what the problem is likely to be defined? Professor Wolf.
Yeah, so clearly we know that the World Bank has been a bit slow to evolve with the global economy it serves. So largely its institution and its power players represent the world of the Bretton Woods agreements at the end of the Second World War, and that was obviously a huge influence on even today's modern situation, but 70-some years of rapid economic development has shuffled the players, and the World Bank probably could do a much better job at reflecting that. It's also true that even the sort of agreement between the U.S. and the IMF, where the IMF leadership is selected by Europe and the World Bank leadership selected by the U.S., two things are true. That doesn't need to be the case anymore. It's pretty narrow. And by the way, just because the Americans pick the World Bank president actually doesn't mean it has to be an American. That being said, I don't know that our president right now would be the first to want to break that tradition. But I do know something very interesting, which is the first full year of whomsoever is the new World Bank leader will be the first year since the World Bank came into existence in which the United States is not the largest economy in the world. And that probably should be a bit more reflective in the organization, so it's the poetically correct timing to broaden the view. And I do think that, look, the last year has showed, at least those of us who see a convincing argument for climate change, a lot of adverse climate issues rising all over the world. And I would add to the climate change the inequality issue, which has been really front and center for most people and really does require a global institution like migration, like international free trade. So we find ourselves with intrinsically international issues defining the obstacles to progress.
If we talk about the structure of the World Bank, of course, one of the most important things is how it's being governed and how decisions are being made. At this point, the United States has the veto power of all the decisions made by the World Bank, by the board. And it has 16% of the voting right, while Japan has 6.9%, and some of the other countries have a much smaller share. So, Mr. Tangen, will that be challenged at a critical time when some of the biggest economies in the world are saying, well, we are not necessarily interested anymore in the global institution, while other players are coming up and playing bigger role in the global economy and certainly contribution to both the World Bank and the international system?
Actually, that ship has sailed. I mean, the creation of the AIIB, the BRICS Bank, a number of institutions, the whole Belt and Road Initiative was, in essence, a reaction to the kind of moribund nature of these two institutions and their unwillingness to share power. So this is a continuation, but this could lead to a new page, depending on what Donald Trump does. It's possible that things could change dramatically. Remember, the president of the World Bank is chosen by the executive board, 25 members who are there. They are not required to vote for the American. It has been an understanding, but somebody who doesn't respect understandings is Donald Trump, so quite possible it could go the other way this time around.
We do not want to do a tack on the American president, but the things are very interesting right now because last time, even during the nominee of the Obama administration, which is Mr. Jim Yong Kim himself, he was actually challenged during the process when he was on his way to become the president of the World Bank by two other nominees coming from Colombia and also Nigeria. So there were precedents. Of course, according to tradition, it is usually an American citizen that eventually becomes the president of the World Bank. But Professor Wolf, so this process this time for competition to who will be the next president seems to be even more exciting, one would assume.
Yeah, and given the divided nature of American politics, whatever side you come down on any issue, it's also quite possible for the first time that American opinion, including even American government opinion, won't be united behind the official American candidate. That is something that we have not seen before, which could alter the dynamic. But the truth is, it's a global economy, and it's a world that's continuing to sort of globalize, if in fits and starts with steps backward as well as forward. And it's a world that's less American than it was 70 years ago, even though obviously still a very prominent, important place for the U.S. And it's quite possible, too, that by the time the next World Bank president, after this one is picked, the United States is not the first or the second largest economy in the world, and the World Bank, to stay relevant, needs to reflect those realities.
But on the other hand, Mr. Tangen, as skeptical as we could, the balance of power within the World Bank and the continuation of stability of the World Bank institution in order to be able to still fulfill the role that the board as a whole is assigning to the World Bank is also important. So how should we make sure, many is wondering right now, the balance? On the one hand, there has to be new ideas and also new momentum, as well as new challenges being brought out in this process of selection, just to be fair, to fit into the current situation of the world economy. But on the other hand, it has to be a smooth and stable transition so the World Bank as an institution could still function well. That is quite a delicate balance.
Well, you've laid out the rational case. The question is, will the current leadership follow it? Remember, this is playing out against the backdrop where the State Department has downgraded the EU down to basically an organization instead of the same level as a diplomatic as an ambassador. So it's a very, very strained time. We also have trade disagreements and things like this. So it's quite possible that this could be the break point at which things happen. Now, I mean, obviously we have to speculate a little bit of why Jim Yong Kim has resigned. I mean, you did that marvelous interview, and he said, when there's no hope, you know, they should fire me. That suggests to me that he has lost hope for this institution.
We do not want to put words into Dr. Kim's mouth either, but what's going to happen, I'm sure there will be future stories coming out talking about that, particularly 1 year from now. On the other hand, the World Bank is an important global institution. After all, Professor Wolf, it is responsible for many of the goals set in the Global Development Goals, and that is extremely important. So SDGs, as they say, the World Bank is shouldering bigger responsibilities.
Look, the Sustainable Development Goals are one of many things, and we shouldn't throw the baby with the bathwater here. The World Bank has done many life-transformative and important projects all over the world across its history since the Second World War, and it also meaningfully reinvented itself already once, turning from a more Keynesian development institution to more of a sort of market deregulatory organ, ideological organ, and that was a major shift almost to the DNA level, if not in the makeup of the membership. So it has proven its ability to change. And I would caution one other thing as an economist. We tend to think these institutions are all kind of useless at the end of a long expansion, only to discover we're much better off having them than not when those expansions inevitably give way to economic downturns, and those loans and those facilities become very important to hundreds of millions of people around the world.
There might be problems and challenges facing these international institutions such as the World Bank, but if you look at that, it is a process that they have been going through in order to reinvent themselves. If you think about it, Mr. Tangen, at the end of the Second World War, the poverty population in the world, extreme poverty, extremely high as a result of chaos. And now, when economies, particularly developing and emerging economies, are getting much better, the role of the World Bank has also been evolving. It is trying to address much more with the development issues with more least developed countries. So it seems that an organization is gradually trying to reinvent itself. But how are we going to see it as a continuation process rather than abruptly interrupted by some of the political choices taken by certain countries?
Well, quite frankly, there has to be inclusion, and that's the problem. This is a political institution that was set up, as you pointed out, post-World War II, to try to bring order to the world, and it has undergone change. But now it's in need of a radical change again, and it's not just on the ideological basis, it's based on where the growth is. If you start looking at the World Bank's projected growth, you'll see that the developing and emerging world is 2.2 percentage points higher in terms of growth extended out over the next 10 years above the developed countries. So you're going to continue to have this kind of widening gap between the perception and the reality, where money is being made versus where the money is.
Professor Wolf?
Yeah, I think that's very true, and I think that the basic understanding of what accountability and transparency is required for leadership among international institutions has also changed enormously in the last 70 years, maybe even in the last 15 years. I think part of the World Bank's historical issue is that transparency and inclusion is a major challenge, and it's become much more of a challenge in an age, as you said, of a connected world where information travels much further, much faster, and much more widely, and so issues and shortfalls become major pain points fast. I do think there's a modernization required, but I wouldn't give up hope that could be achieved.
One of the things that the international institutions, the World Bank included, is not only to look at just the skin deep, but rather with a much longer vision. Of course, the Sustainable Development Goals of the United Nations does help with that, but still institutions themselves, such as the World Bank, also have to make sure that it's being ingrained, that the longer vision in all the projects they are doing right now. So Professor Wolf, I think from that perspective, it is also demanding a stability and a continuation of operation with, of course, more energy and more momentum coming into the institution and make it reinvent itself.
Absolutely, and I think that instead of figuring out how to get countries into the global financial architecture, which largely is run still by a small handful of developed countries, might be interesting to look at what happens if we make more of an effort to deepen and develop the national economic and financial structures of developing countries so that they don't necessarily take on all the risks and fragilities associated with economic development, which can sometimes be an unintended consequence of developing nations by helping them tap into international financial markets, which can in some moments be difficult or even predatory.
Mr. Tangen, final words from you as well.
It's a bit of an anachronism, but we need it. I would agree with my colleague on that, but it was created when the world was unipolar, and today it is multipolar.
Well, of course, we want to wish Dr. Kim, the president of the World Bank, all the best when he's taking on his new positions, and certainly whoever is coming into that role is going to shoulder a lot of responsibilities together with his team or her team at the World Bank. Thank you so much for now, the two of you, for being with us and sharing your insights. Max Wolf, Einar Tangen. Really appreciate it, gentlemen. And you're watching World Insight with me, Tian Wei. Still to come on our program. The latest gigs and tech in their biggest show as the Consumer Electronics Show kicks off. What will sweep us off our feet now? Welcome back. You're still watching World Insight with me, Tian Wei. The world's largest personal tech exhibition has officially launched in Las Vegas. The Grand Consumer Electronics Show provides tech companies a platform to showcase their new creations to a global audience. Before our discussion about what to discover from the CES this time, take a look at this.
A festive mood for the CES kickoff in Las Vegas. This is on the fashion show floor, where more than 4,400 companies from around the world are exhibiting their products. Over 180,000 visitors are expected to attend the huge annual Consumer Electronics Show. At CES 2019, technology enthusiasts are expected to showcase innovations like self-learning technology, other breakthroughs in AI, autonomous vehicles, Internet of Things-enabled devices, 5G, smartphones 2.0 are also highly anticipated this year.
Well, the big thing is clearly artificial intelligence. AI pervades the show. We have a separate area. There's almost every major company is showing AI and applications that are just truly jaw-dropping.
Would you like the robot cleaner to help clean the living room?
Sure, that'd be great. Thank you.
R9 is starting to clean.
13 to 14% of the show's footprint is taken up by Chinese companies. One of those making waves is the company Royole, which in October released the world's first flexible phone. It actually has 1, 2, and 3 screens. As crowds marvel at the Flex Pi for the first time, the company is showing off its bendable screens in phones, apparel, and much more.
So what we're seeing here is a flexible keyboard. That's literally, a full-size keyboard that is made on top of a thin film, and you can actually just retract it with an electronic motor, and you can.
It's really thin, huh? How thin
yes,
is that?
it's under 50 micron. So that's very, very thin. As you can see here, I'm typing. So CES. That's it.
New auto technologies are striking a pose in Las Vegas.
A vehicle with legs could drive first responders to a location like any traditional vehicle, but then walk or climb over treacherous terrain to directly reach the injured or stranded like you saw in the video.
With all the tech on show at the CES 2019, some people have pondered how innovation has benefited humanity. Is it more than we bargained for?
Better life, better world. Is that what we want from CES and anything that we do here in this world? But for 2019 CES in New York, we have Michael Baran, who is the founder of Grace Innovation. Welcome, Michael. In Beijing, Andy Mok, a non-resident fellow at the Center for China and Globalization. Andy, welcome as well.
Great to be here.
I wish I were there, in fact, the gentleman. What about you, Michael?
Thank you for having me. Yeah, I would love to be there right now.
What about that fascinates you this time?
I think that, some of the most fascinating things this year are going to be technologies that really push forward efficiency, things that help protect the environment, things that are good for climate change. I think these are going to be big technology advancements, and that's what I see trending. That's what I see people really getting behind and supporting.
I want that giant wall TV. I also want that, very flexible screen that you can just write like a piece of cake. Andy, there are a lot of things fascinating over there. Certainly, this is about translating latest technologies into real stuff that can benefit real people in their real lives. Andy?
Absolutely.
Oh, definitely.
Yeah.
I think it's
Andy, please.
Oh, sure. So no, I think that it really is an extravaganza, and it's lots of exciting new products, all kinds of eye candy, from electric cars, driverless cars, electric driverless cars. But what I think what's pretty exciting, though, is what's going on maybe under the hood. So quantum computing is a term that I think we'll be hearing a lot more about. IBM's CEO, Ginni Rometty, delivered a keynote talking about their new integrated quantum system that I think we'll be seeing more of in the years to come, the days, months, and years to come.
I wish we have more footage to show our viewers all over the world what's going on there in the CES. Let my producers play them on. But Mr. Baran, Michael, if I ask you, what do you see as the most important component of the latest technology that can really translate into the things shown at CES this year? What would you say?
I would say IoT is really, really revolutionary. Internet of Things, the future of Internet of Things is going to be fascinating to watch. Much the way today we have people developing apps for smartphones and devices, over the next 5 to 10 years, we're going to see a real growth with Internet of Things and people developing apps for that. And those are the type of apps that are going to affect our day-to-day lives and create, efficiencies for us and change the way that we live.
But you sound so abstract, Michael. We are talking about real stuff being shown over there at CES that's supposed to benefit, the housewives, how they fold their clothes every day, how the floor is being swept, how you are going to set your TV in your house. The Internet of Things sounds fascinating, but what about for the real people? And algorithm sounds fascinating, AI sounds fascinating, but you have to translate them into the real stuff. That is the beauty of this show, in fact, Michael.
Oh, of course, definitely. But as we move forward in IoT, our cars are going to be able to tell us, when they need maintenance. Our refrigerators are going to be able to tell us, when we need to, refill the milk. Doing laundry, we're going to know right away when we're low on detergent. We're going to be able to hit a button on our phone, and that comes right to our house. These integrations are already happening. We're going to see this advance in our lives more and more, and it's going to directly benefit those housewives that you're talking about.
For lazy people like me, it's going to be perfect. Andy, what about you?
Well, I completely agree, and I think one of the most important benefits for housewives, for house husbands, for business people actually is the voice interface. So whether we're talking about Siri, Alexa, Google Assistant, that what we're seeing at CES and out in the wild are now products where we can say, vacuum cleaner, start vacuuming, or beer machine, make me a beer. So I think that's
already
an
a reality.
Advance.
Come on, Andy.
It is. And this is, I think, the excitement of an event like CES, where these products are formally launched.
Right, indeed. But there are several things that really need to seriously discuss with both of you gentlemen. One of the things is the data issue. I mean, the privacy issue, the data issue is actually the most important issue these days when you see further technological innovation and translation of technology into real things that people can use, whether it's app or something else. actually it is becoming such a huge issue, but we do not see, well, gadgets are getting better. The system is necessarily getting more sophisticated. Michael, do we?
I completely agree with you, and that's a great question. I think a big thing is, where do we draw the line? We want these companies to be able to provide better user experiences for us, and they do that through the collection of data, but they also have a responsibility to protect our privacy and to protect that data that we entrust to them. So I completely agree. I think that, laws and privacy issues are completely necessary, but we also need to walk that fine line and let these technology companies have some freedoms in order to improve the technology and the platforms.
Andy, we've been talking about that for a long time. How come there's not an implementation of it, whether it is in the specific law or in, let's just say, industry regulations?
Well, I think it's a work in progress, Tianwei, and we do see progress being made.
I mean, how long will this work in progress be?
Well, this is something that certainly does not happen overnight, and we can see, especially Europe seems to be a leader here with their general data protection regulation. But I think the key issue here is that still many companies, I think, have not accepted this idea that the data belongs to the user. And if we start with that simple concept, I think that that will ripple through to regulations, company policies, and hopefully that will accelerate in 2019 and the future.
Look at that, the fold-up phones. Isn't that fascinating? And certainly a lot of things going on in the car that's going to help us a lot, and we do not have to work that hard when we're using all of these devices. Having said that, though, we also see another issue, a lot of new kids on the block. Shall we say not just new kids anymore. They're actually grown up. For example, new players coming from developing and emerging economies, the companies themselves. How are they likely to be in this global competition? Will this competition be a fair one, particularly if you see a lot of trade wars going on these days, a lot of trade debate as well? Andy?
Well, I'm optimistic because we look at the tech oligopoly in the United States of Facebook, Apple, Google, Amazon, and we have the comparable companies of Baidu, Alibaba, Tencent, the so-called BAT. But yet we also see new companies like ByteDance that come out in the last few years, become very large, influential companies as well. So I think that for me, gives me a certain degree of optimism that it is difficult to become successful in the tech world, but there still are opportunities for newcomers.
What do you think, Michael? What about the new kids or the new grown-up and the new stars these days?
Well, I think that's what makes tech so special, is that there is so much competition. And when you have so much competition, it breeds innovation. So you're forced to innovate. You're forced to move forward and forge new ideas. It's the nature of business. It's the nature of entrepreneurship. And it's the nature of technology. So I think that benefits consumers, that benefits investors, that people are forced to kind of go outside the box and start developing new niche markets, looking at new verticals and where they can grow their idea a different way than maybe with what they launched with.
We've been talking about AI for a long time, and some even say the future of tech world is going to be a competition of AI, literally. Of course, AI is a very abstract concept. There are a lot of things that can be included in the overall concept of AI. Algorithm is one of those, but algorithm, one of the things interesting about it, Andy, is about setting the rules, isn't it? If you think about how algorithm is being designed, it is literally setting the rules for our lives and how we are going to interact, whether with new technologies or new gadgets. So Andy, what about that, the algorithm? We do not still have a absolutely fascinating discussion about that aspect of the algorithm and creating algorithm. Andy?
Well, I think one way we could think about this question of algorithms is that there's what's called artificial narrow intelligence, which means artificial intelligence that is suited for one specific task. And the challenge there with algorithms are they biased? And do we understand why they're making the predictions they're making? And that is, I think, an important ethical question that many companies are having to grapple with, whether that's Facebook, whether that's Google, whether that's...
Grapple with, but not necessarily giving an answer yet.
Not yet, not yet. I think we are making a lot of progress as consumers become more concerned, governments feel the need to step in, and I think the companies themselves are seeing an impact on their bottom lines if they're not solving this problem.
Michael, what do you think about that? I mean, algorithm and things related, who is going to set the rules? What about those rules? And are they going to fit many, not just in the United States on the East or West Coast, but also many around the world when they're having very different circumstances?
Yeah, I mean, I think AI is such a new concept as far as, delivering that to the masses. AI has been around for a little while, but it's starting to be integrated into our lives much, much more. So I think as AI develops, we need to slow down a little bit. I'm a huge advocate of artificial intelligence. I do believe that it's going to make our day-to-day lives much, much easier and more efficient. But I think we need to be cautious, and I think we need to understand that, this is something that it's at the beginning right now, and we need, advisors, we need experts, we need people who really understand AI in positions to give consultations to people who are making decisions based on laws and culture and society. I think that's very, very important that we understand the nature that AI plays, and that AI effectively is learning from human beings. So how is our behavior dictating how the AI effectively learns from us?
Shall we slow down, Andy?
Well, I think in theory it sounds good to say slow down, but given that we're really in a global environment that is market-driven and companies are profit-driven, and I think that the ability to slow down might be limited. But we do need to balance this, and we do see that corporations are paying greater attention to these concerns, but at the same time, I think they're also looking to move forward as quickly as they can. And we think back, Facebook's original mantra was move fast and break things. And things have been broken, but I think progress has been made too.
Yes, indeed. And things have been broken, things have been made as well. That is what exactly CES is about. But having said that, though, it's not just on the Earth that we are looking at. Some of the latest technologies already bring it so much possible for humans to travel to the other places in the universe. So we see new technology not just limited to everyday life, but much beyond that. Andy, to what extent shall we find that interesting balance between what we can grab right now and let it work for our lives, and what we can prepare for future opportunities?
Well, I think we are at a very exciting time. I mean, a lot of attention, especially we're talking about CES, is around AI, around consumer products and electronic products. But when you think about technology, it's also life sciences, so gene editing. It's about space travel. We've seen enormous advances in 2018 in these areas as well. So I think that there's a lot to be excited by, and also to be careful as well, because each of these tech areas do have significant ethical questions that need to be addressed.
That's for sure. Is that also your thought, Michael?
Yeah, I agree. I think, as AI and even VR, realities start to progress, we're going to see, again, efficiency created. That's going to allow us to do things as a society and as a humanity that we've never done before, including space travel. So I think that that's incredible, including measuring elements of space and figuring out how we reach those goals moving forward. But I also think that, if you look at the state of everything, we're actually starting to create almost another reality within VR and with AI and augmented reality here on Earth too. So it seems that that's where something is also progressing, and I think that there's going to be leaps and bounds there, as well as what we can do with medical, with science, and then just, again, the day-to-day lives that we all share. I think that we're going to see that affected in major ways over the next 5 to 10 years with these new forms of reality that we're creating.
Gentlemen, Michael and Andy, in your answers, there are a lot of things that you say and suggest that should be taken into consideration, that should be think of, that should be really think hard and look into. And yet the question is, many of the things that we mentioned have not necessarily been looked into, because right now commodities can be sold in the market, but ideas, especially research about ideas, is much different a factor. So we are seeing the debate and the ideas and also research about ideas much lagging behind what is actually going on in the market, which is commodities or products. So how are we going to fix that issue? I guess that's a very interesting issue right now, particularly when you see AI and the technology that are really driving our lives in much faster speed than we could realize. Michael.
Well, I think it's all, again, like you said, you brought up a great point. It's all market-driven. It's consumer-driven. Wherever the consumer places their attention is where we see the fastest and most exponential growth. So I think right now, still, AI and VR, it's still a fringe. You know, it's not in everyone's home yet, like the internet is. It's not, you know, in everyone's hand yet, like smartphones are. So I think as more and more consumers become aware and conscious of the power of VR and AI and IoT, I think that's when we'll start to see things speed up significantly.
Will that be the case, Andy?
I do think so. I mean, one of the things that's exciting is that we see on the research side, there's greater and greater collaboration globally. But of course, due to international relations, trade tensions, that is throwing up some obstacles. So I think that's something we need to consider as well, in addition to just the linkage between R, research, and D, development and commercialization. So again, I think it's a complex phenomenon that has multiple factors we need to pay attention to.
Andy Locke, Michael Baran, what a pleasure to have both of you for being with us. Thank you so much. And that is all the time we have for today. If you'd like to see more, try to find us World Insight CGTN into your search engine. Check out our YouTube channel. Follow us on Twitter, Facebook, Sina Weibo. From me, Tian Wei, and everyone on the World Insight team, thanks for watching. Tune in again next time for insights across China and around the world. Good night.